So time management, I don't think is a problem anymore for you, right? So because what we've done now is we figured out that, hey, this is the blocks of time you are actively spending for work, right? Your mandated, time in the day to get all your projects done. And this is the actual amount of time you could be spending on personal projects, right? So that's good. That's what time blocking does for you, right? They're able to actually see the time that you could be spending. But the question is, okay, now that that time is there, how do I spend it? All right. Well, welcome to the Level Up podcast. Today we have a really, really cool guest here together with us. We have Sarah, and she has a fantastic, wonderful backstory. I can't even begin to describe where she's from. I don't even think she knows where she's from. But today we're here on the Level Up podcast where we have really insightful and meaningful discussions about our life. Where are we at right now? Where do we want to go? And what does leveling up really mean to us? And so I think before we get into all that, let's get a quick introduction from Sarah. Who are you? Where are you from? Tell us all about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been living in Singapore for the last 3 months or so. I'm originally Portuguese by passport on paper, but I've really grown up, around the world. I studied in the US. I lived in Thailand most of my life. So, wow. I've had quite a diverse upbringing, I would say.
Yeah, so how did you end up going around all these different places? And also maybe a more interesting take on that is, how did that change your worldview? I think growing up in Thailand probably was very different, and then going to US after that to study was also very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, my perspective I really feel like a global citizen, first of all. And I don't really resonate with this question, where are you from?
Okay.
That so many people ask me. I really feel like the real question is, where are you a local? Where do you spend your time? What are the cultures that you've lived in and resonate with you? So yeah, I think my perspective on this is quite different than most, though I do feel like there are so many more global citizens in the world these days.
I think we call ourselves third world.
Third world. I have
kids.
a stamp. I'm a third world culture kid.
Yeah. Wow. And I'm curious then, does that make you feel like your life path is very different than many other people? Do you feel like not many people can resonate with how your life has been so far?
I think that was an obstacle when I was younger in terms of developing my identity. And sure, I think when I was exploring various interests in terms of career, I did see some obstacles because I've always been interested in politics, diplomatic relations, human rights, and I've not really been able to represent countries. Okay. Because of my very complicated passport situation.
Right.
So yeah, I guess initially in my career, I did see that as a disadvantage. Though I think these days, I think my perspective is only getting more broad with more cultures that I work with as well. So I think it's great. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's the beauty of the world we live in nowadays, right? We get a chance to really have so much different diverse influences come into our lives, so many different people we can see. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of traveling, what I love about it is you can actually see how other people live and see how that might influence the way that you see the world, right? A little bit of a perspective shift, if you will. And I guess I'm really curious about that, where it's we've had a few discussions about this too, right? About our stage of life. But if you had to really kind of give a look into where you think your life is at right now, how would you define it? What is the stage of your life that you're in?
So I'm at a point in my life where I'd really like to think about permanence. Up until this point, it's been full of impermanence, moving around, traveling for school, traveling for work. Moving homes, I think I counted, I've lived in, more than 5-6 homes, probably been to more than 10 schools.
Wow.
So I'm really eyeing, how can I build that home in my life? Where is that going to be? And I think being, having a background like I do makes it quite challenging because my family is really scattered all over the place. And, picking a I think it's almost easier when you don't have a choice in where you live,
Sure. Yeah.
than when you have so many choices.
You have the whole world to choose.
You have the whole world to choose, and then how can you ever settle and be complete with one choice? So I'm at that point in my life. So we're exploring. I think we have we're working on creating somewhat of a checklist for all the things we've realized we need in our life in terms of lifestyle, access to nature, access to family, education, friends, or all of these are factors that are really important.
Okay.
In where we find that place to settle, if there is one.
Right. And I think you said it right. There probably isn't just one, right? Like some people choose multiple places to settle, so to speak. And I think you said it right too. Like, it's more so about family, more so about the people, right?
Community is definitely what I've realized is the biggest factor. I think community is what really keeps you alive. Who takes care of you when you're sick and old, the people you want to be around when you're celebrating or when you're going through something very difficult. My experiences being with strong communities, whether I'm just a visitor, getting like an inside view, or I'm with family, they make you realize just how valuable that really is. Yeah,
and something we end up taking up for granted a little bit, I think sometimes we do find ourselves in like a nice tight-knit community, and we don't end up realizing how special that is until we don't get that anymore.
Yeah, they do say it takes a village to raise a child, and I definitely believe it.
100%. Yeah. So would you say what would you say is your biggest challenge right now, in your life? What would be like the biggest thing you're trying to fight against?
I think, interesting question. The biggest challenge in my life. Yeah, I think it's what I've written on the board here.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
If you don't mind, we kind of head to this direction.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a nice segue, I guess, because alignment with self, that means a lot to me at this point in my life. So, what I've kind of reflected on is throughout my education, I was always kind of eyeing, what is the best thing for me to do here?
Okay.
And like going to quite a rigorous academic school, they were always setting expectations of what the ideal standard of success was.
Interesting.
And I experienced that in university as well. And everyone's kind of like eyeing for very similar jobs and similar careers. And yeah, it kind of took me a while to realize that, that's not the only version of success, which is quite crazy to think about because it's so obvious, to be honest.
Sure, but we're not taught that in school, right? We're not taught that there are different ways to run your life, so to speak, or live the life that you want to live. Exactly.
And like during COVID, I was lucky. I was in Thailand. I got to travel around a lot in the north, in the south. I really had a taste of very different lives. And yeah, it caused me to reflect a lot. I was really wondering, do I leave, the big tech industry? Do I go and do something like very simple? Like I would love to open like an ice cream shack on the beach, for example.
Oh, that sounds fun.
So I think I kind of like struggle with, these more creative passions, so to speak, and doing something a little bit more, I don't know, safe or like clearly defined. So alignment with self is, I guess, the challenge that I'm like working through at this point. And it's so important for me to really make that alignment with myself at this stage of my life. Rather than just continuing in the path that I am. So yeah, that's definitely something I'd like to, make some progress on in the coming months.
I noticed that there's like an arrow here, right? Like, what does that mean to you? Like, is it like a progression of sorts to become like, what is the top of the pyramid, so to speak? If you could help us understand that a bit better.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess at the top of the pyramid is maybe like what some might refer to as like your higher self, or, an essence of you that is like a very true being.
Sure.
And I would say I'm like very true to myself, but I want my own like like actions to align with my interests, so to speak. So I think like at the pinnacle of that is like absolute alignment. Yeah. What do you think is at the top of that?
Well, I mean, thanks for sharing first and foremost. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful aspiration to have. And I think you can definitely do it. And to me, what it sounds like, you know, there's another word for this that I've heard often being used. It's called integration, right? Are you integrated across your many selves? Because a lot of times when we kind of differentiate, this is our work life, this is our, you know, studying life, school life, this is our personal life. Yeah. That makes us very different across all our different personas, right? And when we operate differently in all these different scenarios, we end up feeling more and more dissociated with ourselves. Because like, you know, who are we? Are we the person that we are in our workplace? Are we the person when we're doing our creative endeavors? Are we the person with our partners? And so what this really means to me, right, and why I push it so much is it's aligning yourself with who you really are, right? And making sure that there's no incongruency with, you know, all these different personas that you might feel that you have to be right, to survive in the world. And I think that's also ridiculous as a notion, because how crazy is it that we have to be all these different selves?
Like
right?
we have a mask for like all these different places and experiences and people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really a troubling sign of our current times, really, that, you know, it's almost like, you know, the funny thing is like there's two tangents we can go on here. And the first one perhaps is like, you know, the common everyday trope of like, okay, this is, you know, your persona at work, and don't take it personally because this is a work conversation, right? Yeah. People say that all the time and say, hey, this is just work, right? And you're expected to just suck it up. This is it.
And also like we have to talk in a more formal tone.
Yes.
Wear something a little bit more formal, perhaps.
Sure, right? And those are different ways of manifesting a different self, right? I think those are considerably minor forms of that. Sure. I think the major forms of that might be more personality driven, right? But then there's also the other part where people say, just be yourself. But dude, if you tell that to anybody, just be yourself, like what is yourself? You know, who are you, right? Because you've just put on the mask for so long that you almost have no idea what is yourself, what is your best self, right? So I think maybe that's a really interesting tangent to go on, is that, hey, I know that right now it's a discovery process. It's going to be a discovery process for all of us here and anyone watching at home. But let's start having that discussion. Like, what is your best self? Where do you see your best self being? Like, if you could like imagine that person, right? What would that look like? Who would that look like?
My best self.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like very different elements of my best self. You know, it doesn't just appear in one form.
Yeah.
One of those areas is, you know, like I am a highly empathetic person. So I really feel like sometimes I can resonate with somebody who's going through something, and I can offer support, I can offer advice. I do see that, you know, a true version of myself shines through. And I really love to feel like I'm able to provide some support for somebody else. So that's definitely where I do see one alignment with myself.
So let's write that empathy. So that, I'll keep making notes as we go along, but empathy is one, right? What's the next one?
Okay. So how would you look at this? You know, are these like personality traits, or
however you want to do it? Let's not put any categorization yet. Just anything that goes to the top of your mind. This is your ideal best self. You look at this person, you're like, wow, they are blank, 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 and whatever blank.
I mean, I can be quite an engaging person. So I think like that shows up, you know, if I'm like talking to you, for example, I've been told like, you know, I'm quite animated with my expressions.
Is that something you want to be? Sorry, like just be clear.
That's not intentional.
Okay.
That just happens.
Okay.
But I don't think that is really a personality trait, to be honest, that I would put on the board.
I think let's not even look at traits or not. Like, you know, what I think about when I think about best self is like, you know, who do you want to be? Right. And I think people like, it's so funny. Like when we were kids, this was a question that we would be able to answer. It's like, oh, I want to be a police man or police woman. Right. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer, like whatever. Like you would have some kind of definition, like superhero, right? Like name your, you know, Marvel character. But ultimately you can distill them down to like very clear tropes of what that person means, right? What does that mean to you? And then what I wanted to do is get to that. Let's not talk about the roles. Let's not talk about like personality traits or whatever, but more specifically, like who are those people, right? Who is your best self that you want to kind of grow into and emulate?
Well, then, yeah, I think my best self is somebody who can help somebody else, to be honest, who can provide meaning and value in somebody else's life.
Helpful, right? Would you use that as a word? Okay. Add meaning, right? So add value.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? It's okay if that's a good list for now, actually, but if you have anything else on your mind.
I'm not so sure.
Okay. No, it's a wonderful start. I love it. Okay, so now that we have this down, right, this is your beginning point of alignment with self, right? You want to be someone who is helpful, empathetic, and adds value to someone's life. That is your ideal version of you.
I mean, I can add on here. And, you know, like I want to, when I say add value, I mean, that's like a plus, right? So, meaning like, okay, what if we can open someone's mind to something new? That I think is quite interesting, you know, whether it's giving people a new experience, and, you know, they see something they've never seen, or they feel something they've never felt before.
Right.
I think, yeah, that's maybe adding a little bit more detail here.
Okay. I like that. So like transforming someone's perspective, so to speak, like
Maybe.
giving them an experience they wouldn't have had before.
Yeah, providing experiences, new experiences, and good, or, you know, it doesn't even have to be a new experience. It could just be a good experience.
Yeah, experiences, right? Let's write that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, how far along do you think you are in this? Like, if best self had like a...
I think, you know, I'm doing this informally through like the channels of my friends and family.
Sure.
So, you know, wanting somebody to be a little bit healthier, and, you know, suggesting, or like maybe even like ordering them a meal plan or something, just trying to open their mind up to some, you know, some new diet or some new health activity that can benefit them.
Yeah, just for the record, we have all turned like very vegan now in the house because of Sarah's influence. So I think that's for sure something that's happening with us too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a passion I have, is definitely like health and wellness related, just because I feel so much better in my life for eating, sleeping, and exercising better. And I really feel like that can have tremendous impact on everyone's life. And I don't think, you know, so many of us are able to do that for some reason, to be honest. So
do you feel like your value here is that you're able to see the things that we should be doing and aren't doing, and you can help, you know, move the needle?
I mean, I think
that?
they're out there, you know, everyone, it's, you know, I think a lot of it is out there if you're looking for it. Right. But yeah, I guess like accessibility, or, you know, people just like not really prioritizing. And yeah, that's definitely like a personal decision, but I think there's also like a lot of misconceptions out there.
Sure. Tons, right? The health fads and everything, and this new diet, that new diet, you know, whatever it might be, supplements.
Yeah.
There's so many garbage out there. Let's call it that. Yeah. Fake news.
And I guess I've also been surrounded by, you know, like family members who weren't healthy, and I really had to go out of my way to kind of figure out what works for me. Had my own health issues, couldn't figure out what was the root cause, and had to kind of like dissect my life until I was able to impact,
right.
To see the impact and some of the better activities. So yeah, I think that's an interesting area of my own interest.
I see. And so like, this is something that you're working on in personal, like
it's
through
not,
your...
Yeah, it's not my work by any means. You know, when it comes to this kind of thing, and I recently talked to my partner about this, I would love to create something that is scalable for more people, you know, perhaps even a business, but until I can pinpoint like what that is or how it should be expressed, yeah, it's just something I'll have as a passion, I suppose.
what's the difference between passion and, a business for you anyways? Let's not use a common definitions. I don't want to know your definition.
So those are very separate things to me, unfortunately. Passion and what was the other one?
Career
business. Yeah. Because passions have always been the things I've done on the side. Like I was a violinist for a very long time. And that was a passion. I did consider taking that up as like a full-time career at one point, but it was kind of like, no, this is something I like to keep on the side. Career for me has always been tied to, what is going to be like profitable, what is like a strategic thing to do. I've always kind of had like more foresight for this perspective, rather than just following my passion, so to speak.
Okay. Do you feel like that has given you an advantage or a disadvantage? Like, how do you feel about it?
I think it was helpful for what I wanted to achieve, up until a certain point. And now I reached a point where I'm like, you know what? I don't have any regrets, to be honest, because those things were very important for me. Financial freedom, the ability to work in, a kind of global work environment, working on very innovative technologies. That was all very interesting to me. And I might have questioned, like what could have been if I didn't explore that.
Yeah. Well, I think actually what you described is very good. Like, I don't recommend anybody actually jump straight into like a business from the moment that they have any idea of something that they like. Obviously, I think what is important is make sure you're fed, right? Make sure you have, your lifestyle handled and honed in, have some kind of financial freedom, and then go and explore. And I think what we're exploring here in our conversation is very nice too, because obviously, you're not like 20 years into a career and then you're like, oh shit, I need to come back out and like, figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And I think that's good, right? That's the best thing, is that you're at the right time to figure out like, hey, I spent, a decade now in this career. I now have achieved a certain level of, expertise, right? You're terribly smart. It's amazing how smart you are, right? And there's so many things that now you know how to do that you can now apply into your own business, right? So this is the time to figure out like, hey, is the work that I'm doing aligning with my best self, right? Are you able to exercise your helpfulness, your empathy, your, adding value through experiences to people, right? And if so, to what degree, and what kind of career/lifestyle would you be wanting to do that would actually give you the maximum potential of all these? That's the question we're asking here, right? So then back to the initial question, right? What is the percentage, let's say, of fulfillment that you have towards these things? How close do you think you are to like, if I ask you, do you feel like you're your best self? Would you say yes or no?
No, not in terms of career. And I see that as also a challenge, because if you want to be motivated to be the best at what you're doing, I would argue you have to be your best self. You have to put your best foot forward every day, and that sounds awful if you really don't find yourself aligned with the work you're doing. So the percentage you're asking,
rough percentage. It's not going to be easy.
With these particular elements, I wouldn't say there's much alignment. There's other like intellectual stimulation.
Sure.
That kind of keeps things interesting for me. But like I would have to say 15%.
Okay.
At most.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And I just want to be clear here too, is that I don't think there's no shame, I think, in like recognizing like this is all just for us to understand where we're at, right? Understand ourselves a bit more. And then so we know where we have to go from here, right? I don't think there's any shame about, us, realizing that we've been working or doing something with our lives that may not be fully aligned because we just didn't know better, right? We did our best with the information that we knew then, right? We did our best with the circumstances that we had, and maybe you valued other things too, right? A year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it doesn't really matter. But what we're just trying to figure out is today, where you're at, and then where do you want to go from there? And I think that's really the beauty of it. So you say 15%, right? So what is 20%, let's say? Let's describe what 20% might look like.
In my current role? Or?
Anywhere. Let's just open it up. Right now, you think you're 15% towards your best self, right? Or 15% expressing your best self.
Yeah.
What would be 20%?
You mean like what are the elements of my work?
What is the elements of 20%? Like what would have to change to make that number 20%?
I think more like face-to-face interaction with my customers, like who I'm dealing with. I work in a tech company. Our consumers are numbers. Basically, we don't see them. We just see a digit. I would like to have like face-to-face interaction with people. That would, I think, my number would go up way past 20 if that were the case.
Okay. Lovely. And so that's really interesting, actually. So right now we're actually exploring a few things, which is like, one, how do we make your current life, right? The life that is within this career that you already have, right? We're not saying quit today and do something else, right? But even within this work that you have the potential to change it to a higher number. Would you say that's like a 30% maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So you jump 15%, you have a double increase. This is like, if you're investing into a stock, that'd be amazing, right? You double your value, right? So that's something that can happen, right? So that's one thing we can keep in mind. It's like, okay, if you can find a way to interact with more customers, right, in your day-to-day work, that could already help you move towards. What's another jump that you could see would happen?
You know what? It's hard to talk about this without, talking about some negative things that come with the workplace. But I think also like working with a much smaller team is something that really excites me. I've really noticed because I've been with a company that started very small and kind of blew up in size, like 100x at least.
Yeah, crazy.
Way more actually. But anyways, when we were smaller, when we were more agile, when we had much easier flow of information, we achieved things much faster. We achieved much more ambitious projects. We took a lot more risks.
Yeah.
That was all very exciting. I think, when companies grow, bureaucracy gets much bigger, organizations become fat and lazy to a degree. And yeah, I think there's something to be said about that, a very large workplace culture.
Yeah. So seems like you're looking for, like if I could mix that with your best self, like it feels like maybe you want to be helpful, but you're not able to be as helpful because there's so much bureaucracy in the way.
Yeah, maybe, perhaps.
Okay. Right. Or like maybe the value that you're adding isn't as much because things aren't getting done.
For sure. I mean, I always feel like I can add more value. I could perform at a higher level. But sometimes, the question is like, to what? Like, what is that in alignment with myself? So yeah, I think performance is directly related to being aligned with yourself as well. Interesting.
So like, what kind of performance are we talking about here? Like you want to
like excelling at what you're doing. Yeah. Having the drive and motivation to, be giving 100% every day. I think comes with feeling like you're quite aligned.
Best self, you're kicking ass, you're doing everything like you're meant to do.
Yeah, and you can have impact as well.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do in a big organization.
I understand. And that's normal, actually. That's growth pains, right? Of like, some people are just really good operators at a certain scale of a company, right? And that's where their strength is. That's what they enjoy. some people are fantastic people for, millions of people in Oregon.
I mean, and the other thing is like, the culture, I think it's so important in such a big organization. It's so important to build a healthy culture, to not let people become complacent and, settle for the status quo. I think that's a really almost toxic work environment. I'm not talking about my own work environment here.
Anyone would agree with that.
Exactly. So I think for myself, like I know I want to work in a much smaller group of people, not just on my own. I'm quite an extrovert. I definitely love being with people. And I was doing a project by myself for a few years, which was great. But it would have been a lot more fun to have someone to,
bounce ideas
exactly
off of. Yeah. I understand that. So we've examined that these are certain things. There's some things you can get probably in the org, right? If it comes down to like meeting customers and those kind of things, I'm sure there's some kind of project that you can do that gets there. But then for other things that now seem a bit insurmountable, right? How can we get that in other parts of your life, right? Until you make that big career jump, perhaps to do something on your own. What can you do to be more aligned in your day-to-day?
I mean, I think, I'm pretty sorted at this point in my life. I live with great people. And so when I come home, I can have interesting conversations, can go for walks in the park. I definitely get my fill of like social engagement in my personal life. So that's currently like not an issue for me.
I see. So what we're trying to do is try to figure out how can career fit that for you then? Would that be like your main challenge today?
I mean, I definitely see people in the office. I'm not going to say I don't have social interaction. But I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking before about and I mean, it's up to you if you want to share more about that, but we were talking about if you were wanting to make that career jump, right? Do something on your own.
Yeah.
And how would that be going for you? How's that going for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've been kind of doing that for the last 2 years on the side. And I mean, it's been great. I think when I talk about it, when I'm working on it, my eyes are like much more lighting up than they do when I talk about my job, which is interesting. Many people notice that. I think like every day is a bigger challenge because there's more to accomplish that you haven't done, and you're accountable to yourself, which is, I think, is much more difficult than being accountable to somebody else.
Of course, yeah. So let's talk about one thing that you wanted to do, but you haven't been doing yet for your own side business.
My website.
Yeah, website. Okay. So what's been going on there? Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I do have a half-functioning existing website, which I love the look and feel of. It doesn't have the functionality, all the functionality that I need. So like, as I told you, I decided it's time to upgrade. It's time to find something better suited to my needs. And like, I guess there's probably no excuse at this point. I probably should have had that done. I've been busy, but like, I probably could have figured out how to make it happen relatively quickly. But sure, it was like it is quite a challenging assignment. Like, I need to learn a new platform, not familiar with Webflow.
Of course.
And take the time to make all the edits. Maybe it's not going to take that long. But I guess that's been one of the checks that remain unticked.
Sure. And it's okay for us to recognize that things are hard. I think you're trying your best not to come out with excuses, right? I think that's what I'm hearing, but I don't think they're excuses, honestly, because in the sense that like they are hard things to do. Let's accept that, right? It's very hard mentally, right? To be like, hey, I'm switching from this site that you already spent probably hundreds of hours on, right?
Yeah,
to work on, right? And then you're basically thinking of it as like, oh, I have to do it again, and I have to relearn a whole new technology based around that, and then I have to like, make new images for the new site, and I need to replace everything, and that's a lot of things to do, right? And so let's be empathetic first to ourselves and like accept that like, hey, this sucks. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. It is hard. And that's okay, right? Let's accept that first, because I think the first if we're still avoiding the idea of it being, hard, then we were just hating ourselves for not doing it. Because I'm sure you feel a certain level of guilt, maybe, right, to yourself, that you're like, hey, how come I haven't done this yet? So knowing that, we're accepting ourselves as we are, right? We're saying, hey, we are someone that, feels this way, and that's okay, right? We're aware of these feelings now, right? So the next step is like, okay, well, how do we get here, right? Well, what is the process in which we got to this place where we have to make this change, right? How do we get here? Can you answer me that question?
Like, how do we get to
this place where, like, oh my gosh, like there's so many things to migrate over. There's this whole new site I want. Like, what is this scenario in this context of the situation right now?
Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to do with the business? Maybe that's the easier question to ask. Like, why does a new site need to exist?
Yeah, it's a great question. So like the nature of the business is we're selling products that are like incredibly high touch. They're very tactile.
Yeah.
Essentially, you need to see them in person before you can really make any decision on whether you want to buy them. And so it's important to have a website that can display these items in a very like clear manner where you can click in and see all the details. So like, I guess very large imagery and things like that. The website is important as sort of like a catalog on one side. On the other side, we are also a service for people to sell their things through us. And so while I've been able to like, I've actually built a great website doing what I've just explained.
Yeah.
Very great imagery, highly visual. I love the way it looks. There's been great feedback.
Yeah.
Where it's lacking is the other side of the business, which is the resale component.
Okay.
And that requires, some thinking about, okay, if somebody wants to sell, what should this web page look like? What should, how are we going to capture their interest? Where is this this should probably then link to a messaging app with an API so that I can get,
Right.
it's all these components that
a lot of things to think
when
about.
I start going into see on like Line's website, for example, like how to do this API integration with Spotify, blah, blah, blah. It's never straightforward. I think that's where, things go far beyond my comprehension.
Right.
And it just is like overwhelming, frustrating, time to take a break.
100% understand that.
Yeah.
And that's normal to feel that way. Absolutely. Like there's a lot of things, right? There's like APIs, you got to figure that out, right? You got to figure out how to link that to your store, your Shopify store. You got to figure out how to, how the user funnel will look like. There's a lot of things to think about right now. It's super tough. It's not easy, right?
I mean, it's not that hard. I think it can be done.
Okay. Could be done.
Should be done.
Could be done,
Should
but
have already been
many
done.
things to do, right?
Yeah.
So
I think that's the challenging. I mean, to be honest, I can make these smaller excuses, but at the end of the day, like I think what I really struggle with, the reason why it's incomplete, is time management. Yeah, sure. Like my schedule is quite busy, but doesn't mean there's no free time. I just think I've not been great at, managing my time well. And I know that's something that, you help me a lot with my calendar, for example. Like we started time blocking. It was really valuable. I think when I started time blocking, it's when I was making progress on my personal projects quite a bit.
Amazing.
And actually just today, I've like started setting up my Notion database and
Amazing.
dashboards, and I can already kind of feel like this weight off of my shoulders starting to happen, where everything is just in the same place.
Yeah.
Be it to-do lists or whatever it is, really, like
100%.
any note, everything and anything just really well organized. And I hope these things are going to be helpful.
Yeah. No, well, I'm so happy that's been helpful for you, right? And I think what you've already have the keys for is 2 out of 3 steps of the journey. And let me recap a bit of that so people at home can also appreciate it. But I think you're doing really well, and we're just going to help you unlock the last piece, and I think you're going to fly. Okay. I absolutely think, I believe so. So let's talk about it, right? So the first one was like, I think you're talking about time management. So time management, I don't think is a problem anymore for you, right? So because what we've done now is we figured out that, hey, this is the blocks of time you are actively spending for work, right? Your mandated, time in the day to get all your projects done. And this is the actual amount of time you could be spending on personal projects, right? So that's good. That's what time blocking does for you, right? They're able to actually see the time that you could be spending. But the question is, okay, now that that time is there, how do I spend it? And if you're spending the first hour of your free time just trying to reorganize your brain, right, to try to figure out what I'm going to do next, that's painful. That's so painful. Nobody should do that, right? And I'm saying even the smartest person out there, even if you have a crazy IQ, you're still not gonna be able to process all these things and switch context so much that you're gonna go crazy, right? How do you switch context from your role at your company to your personal role in your business to your role as a partner to your loved ones? It's so difficult. So the next thing that you've done, which is fantastic, which is you started organizing everything. Everything has a bucket now, right? You're using our Notion templates. Thank you so much, right? I think it's lovely and more than happy to support you with that. Speaking of templates, our episode is proudly supported by the Course 3 Toolbox. It's a huge collection of our best tools to help you take action on your learning. Knowledge is everywhere. If you want to learn about important concepts like building better habits or setting actionable goals, there are infinite videos on the internet. But it can be difficult to turn that knowledge into action. So the Coach 3 Family Foundation is solving that by breaking down these big ideas into small actionable steps and creating workflows for you to easily be able to understand these fundamental principles and apply it into your everyday life. Our tools are built by the community for the community, and we've helped hundreds of thousands of people around the world make work fun, live intentional lives, and take back life control. Check out the toolbox at tools.x3.family and get your free templates today. Now, back to the episode. But essentially, you're able to kind of put everything down. It's your second brain, right? You don't need to think about those things anymore. You just say, hey, I'm ready to do some of my side project work, right? I click this button and I see everything.
See what I need to do.
Right. Your checklist is already there. You don't need to reprocess it in your brain and reorganize and reshape it. So step 2, done. You're really good already.
Finally.
Yes.
It only took this long.
Yeah. Well, it's a step, right? And we shouldn't hate ourselves. We'll just be happy that we're there now. Right?
I'm definitely feeling happier. Yeah.
Right. And this is the third step. So this is the third step, which we need to unlock today, right? Which is, okay, you have the time, right? You're not going to spend the first hour scrambling to figure out what needs to be done, right? Now let's figure out what is the work to be done, right? What I'm hearing, what it seems to me is that your finish line has a lot of ands. I need to do this, and I need to do this, and then I need to do this, and then I need to do this, and then I'm at the finish line.
Yeah.
Right? What is the most simplest version of your finish line? What is the easiest step forward that you can already start doing that will get people into the door that wants to do, for example, the selling side of the business, right? Is there a form that we can put out already so we don't replace your existing site because you love it already, right? Is there a form we can attach to that, right? Or how have people already reached out to you looking to sell their products? Maybe let's talk about that first.
I mean, to be honest, we're working towards having an offline event in the coming months. To be honest, it's not an event because we're looking at renting a showroom for a long-term period. And so it's important to get the inventory ready for that, physically ready. It's important to have the website up so people can take a look before they come. In case we're adding any furniture, there's many steps. I mean, the more I talk about it, there's just endless steps.
So let's simplify it. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in more often now to try to keep it there, because I think you have the answers, but there's a lot you care about the business, which is 100% important. You are the face behind all of it, right? So, but what's important here is perspective. So thankfully I have a different perspective than you here because I don't have all the challenges that you face, right? So that's the blessing I have, right? But here's where I can help. So you said earlier, and I'm just gonna repeat back what you said to make sure you understand, is that you actually like your current Shopify website if it's just for the buying side. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's great otherwise, and adding new things into it, no problem, right? You know the process. It's something you can do.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so the buy side, don't worry about it right now. We already have it handled, right? We don't need to do extra work for something we've already done, because that's frustrating and that's painful because you start thinking about, I've already done this before. I don't want to do it again. Rest.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's normal. So then the sell side, okay. How have people wanted to sell before? Like, has anyone reached out to you before and said, I want to sell, but I don't know how to do it on your website?
Many people.
Okay, great. How do you work through that lead? What happens after they send that to you?
So because we didn't have the website running with this form, I would handle those requests like case by case, or essentially just speak directly to the person.
Okay.
Ask them what they're selling for the pictures of what they're selling. We actually have up until this point, like we've been highly selective about what we resell, just so we can take time to understand the buyer market as well, and not just grow our inventory too large at the beginning. So most of the folks who've reached out organically haven't really been suitable customers to sell based on our initial criteria. So that's been relatively easy to deal with. Right.
So then what's the purpose of this site that would allow people to sell? Is it for the general public, anyone can sell, or is there still going to be a check process before they can list?
There is a process. There's like an approval process, I guess, and it's important that we have this function so that once the business is flowing and people come to this sale and they come to our showroom and they want to sell, they at least feel like, okay, they've been able to send us their inquiry and we'll get back to them.
Okay, so it's just about giving them a place to structurally get their inquiry, right? And to get some more structured details about what they're about to sell, what they want to sell, and not have to waste your time to like contact back and forth. Would you say that's the main purpose of this page?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little more complicated, to be honest, because up until now, like we have a very, very curated collection, and it's furniture, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that until now.
Secondhand furniture.
Secondhand furniture. We've been lucky to have clients that have 60 pieces, very beautiful pieces. We take them all at once, and so as we grow the business, we're going to expand that, and we're taking in more furniture from regular people if it matches a criteria. Yeah. So we do need to have it. It's important that people, but that being said, to be honest with you, this form is not how people in the market would like to make an inquiry. They would rather send a message on a messaging app. I want to sell this. These are the pictures. What do I do? Okay. That's just like how people are used to working in this market. Okay. What if it was a chatbot? What if it was an AI chatbot that just asked you questions? Hey, what do you want to sell? Upload your pictures. And then it forwards it to you, puts it in a database that you want, the way that you want to see it. Yeah. Right? And then you can just list it whenever you think it's a good item. That can work, definitely. Okay. But it would need to have there would need to be like an option where we can also just use line. Okay. Sure. Right. So when I say AI, obviously that's like a few steps beyond, but like the scaling that back is like a virtual assistant, right? Could handle that, or like an intern, right? Could handle that inquiry form or that inquiry chat message platform, right? So do we need a website? I mean, maybe not. Okay. I think actually we're very smart people. And I mean that when I say like, there's been so many times when I avoid something to do and I haven't done it for months. Okay. And then I'll be hating myself. I'll be like, why, Conrad, have you not done this? Obviously it's a good idea. Obviously you need this. Right. And then 2-3 months later, I wake up one day, I'm like, oh, I don't need it at all, actually. That's why I'm not working on it. Or that is quite a revelation. I mean, not in the shape and form that I initially imagined it. That's, likely, potentially the situation, to be honest. It's just like not the right fit. Something is not a fit. Yeah. Okay. I'll let you process for that. I think that's hopefully a big relief off your shoulders. I wish. Eventually, I wish. Right? But anyway, so that's what I kind of want to show you, right? Like, I think you're doing every step properly. You're making the time for the things that you care about to pursue your best self. You are finding ways to make it so that you can tap into that best self. In an easier way. It's categorizing things you don't have to think about all the time. It's off your mind and onto something, right?
And the last thing is to make sure the things you're doing are actually the right things to do. And I think the best way to do that is to have this kind of questioning that we just had right now. And it's good to have someone else ask you these questions, because obviously, you're very close to the problem. You're very close to the things that you need to do, and everything feels important because it is, right? Your perception is definitely your reality, and we shouldn't diminish that. But what someone else can do for you is they can ask you certain questions to help you really think more about it. It's like, okay, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? Why am I doing all these things? And then how could I possibly solve it in the easiest way possible? Because ultimately we don't have infinite time, and we only can do so much. And chances are the best answer is a simple answer.
I don't actually think there needs to be a website, to be honest with you. Yeah,
Lovely.
I think that part is perhaps no longer the focus.
Lovely. Let's talk a bit more about this alignment with self, because I think what I like to do in these sessions is give a little bit of homework, right? Like a little bit of, what else needs to be explored here, and what else we can come back with maybe in 3 to 6 months and say, hey, Sarah did this amazing thing, and this is so in line with what she's talked about, previously. And it keeps a little bit of accountability. You said earlier, right? It's hard to do things on your own. So why should we, right? How do we make this into a process where we're both looking into this and we can support you along the way? So what do you think is your next steps for alignment with self?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to just explore this further. We briefly talked about some of these areas of interest that do feel like when I feel most aligned with myself, like what am I doing? I'm gonna explore that further. There are already a handful of things I'm aware of, but I think I might be turning a blind eye to some other parts of myself that are maybe not so apparent.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to just put myself in situations where I can see those a little bit more closely.
Yeah. Well, let's be a bit specific here. Like when you say put yourself in situations, put yourself in situations where you can be more helpful, right? You can have more empathy, you can add more value. Is that what you're talking about right now?
No, I think there's more things here in addition to those.
Okay. So more like inner work to figure out what is really my best self, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have something for you regarding that, actually.
Okay.
I think that's really cool. So there's 3 things they can look at when you're trying to figure out what your best self is. The first one would be you want to figure out what does your best self have? So you think about it in terms of a game character, right? A game character has equipment that they're holding, that are wielding. Maybe they have a very shiny sword, right? Maybe a very shiny shield, maybe a cape, right? That protects them and gives them invisibility, whatever, right? But every hero has their weapons and their shields and their equipment. So think about what that equipment looks like for you, right? The next thing is what are you doing? So you think of the hero's journey, right? Like a hero does many things. They go and save this village. They go and defeat that monster. They go and do this thing. In real life, what is that equivalent? What is your best self doing on a day-to-day basis? And that can also be something you think about. And then finally, being. Who is your best self, right? If you think about the traits of a modern day superhero, what are they, right? And we talked a bit about it already: helpful, empathetic, etc. But try to be as clear as possible so that at the end of this, you kind of have this, you're in branding, so maybe a brand guide of who this best self looks like of Sarah. Yeah. And I think that could be very, very helpful for you to examine this more.
Yeah. Definitely. I'm gonna do that.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, take a breath. You got this. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience that might be watching, might be going through similar trials and tribulations as you?
Yeah, I think my process that I'm going through, that I spoke about initially, becoming more aligned with myself, it can be very frustrating, to be honest. At least in my experience, it's quite frustrating to be in a situation where you don't feel fully integrated, as Conrad mentioned. And I think that's a good thing, to be honest. The frustration allows you to grow. It allows you to question what you truly want to be doing with your time. And while it can be tough to deal with in the moment, I do believe I'm very grateful for this, because I feel like it's making me so I'm experiencing a level of discomfort where something needs to be done. Yes. I'm not going to be complacent. anymore. And that, I think, is not something to run away from or feel shameful about. It's a great opportunity to really, like, look deeper.
Yeah, and push yourself a little bit, right? Like, I think like any form of pain really gets you to look within, because it makes you realize that there's something there that you should probably pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
And do something about. And I think this is a great form of like a conversation that wouldn't have happened unless you shared about some of that pains with me. Even.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I've been quite open, to be honest, about it. Because why not, to be honest? Like, I don't think it's great to like cover these things up or lie about them. I think it's quite easy to see through them too. So yeah,
share it with someone you know. Don't let it bottle up. Let it out. Yeah, I think that's a great part of it.
And ideally with friends who can, like help you through the process, like ask you questions, help you realize maybe, you had some like skills or passions that maybe you forgot about, or you didn't forget about, but you just don't see as much as other people see in you. So yeah, I think these are all very helpful pieces on this journey.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys for watching. Please have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.